Hey, this is Scott, and today I just want to take a quick first look at the Zcam E2. Just to get it right out there, this is not an actual proper review of this camera, so for people who already own it, this is probably not going to be something you really need to watch, unless you're like me and you just really love watching all of the content on things that you own but are still really excited by. What I do want to do here today is just to go over this camera physically and also the menus, just to show you what's on here in terms of actual buttons and ports and how the menu works, just for people who haven't been able to get their hands on the camera or see it up close. So with no further ado, let's start from the outside. So this is pretty much how I've been using the E2. I've got the small rig cage on here, obviously, with their side handle, top handle, battery, of course. I have a monitor on top of the handle. I've got the Metabones speed booster with EF lenses. I've got another quick release plate here on the bottom of that small rig bottom plate, which has the Arca Swiss, but this just fits quite nicely actually right on the bottom of that, even though it's kind of like a double quick release plate thing going on here. But yeah, this is pretty much how I've been using it. I'm going to go ahead and remove some of this stuff though, just to be able to show you the body itself a little bit better. So starting on the front, you have here a little tally lamp that will tell you, the recording status. You have these F1, F2, F3 buttons, which can be programmed to some custom functions. I think I have mine set to the auto white balance lock to basically give me the same ability of setting a custom white balance with the gray card. Just show the gray card and then lock it and it stays. I think I have these set to some sort of assist functions. I can't remember exactly, but I don't honestly use them that much. For now, still, I want to figure out what functions I use more often, and then I'll program those to these buttons right here. Then you have the power button. Hold it down for a few seconds to turn it on and off, and when the power is on, if you push it once, it will switch over to the preview mode, the playback mode, where you can preview your clips in camera. But if you're recording ProRes, make sure you record proxies together with it if you want to be able to use this to preview your tracks in camera. The other side here is pretty simple. You just have the mount, of course, with the little button here to release whatever lens, or in this case adapter, you have attached, and that's pretty much it for the front of the camera. Over here on the left side, you do have 3 screw holes where I have this cage attached. Now the top one, you might be able to see through this hole because to attach the cage, you use just these middle 2 holes, and the top one is going to be open. But yeah, you just have some screw holes, and you have the same screw holes on both sides of the body. You then have these ports here for headphones and mic, and with the cage on here, you can see that these are a little bit tricky to get access to, but I did find that this door is easier to open than the CFast card slot door on the other side, which we'll talk about in just a second. On the right side, again, you have those 3 screw holes, 2 of which are being used to attach this cage here, and you can see again the third one through this top open space in the cage. And then you have the CFast door, which you can see that I have partially open because especially with this cage on there, it's nearly impossible to get this thing open. You have this little cutaway right here where you can get your nail under there, but it's really difficult to open that up, and having this cage right in the way of that makes it even more difficult. So I almost never close this all the way. I keep it open just a little bit so that way I can pry that open. I have to close the bottom part because I slide that NATO rail handle on the bottom here, and this will get in the way, but I keep the top open a bit so I can grab it and open that up more easily without having to spend 10 minutes and get some bloody fingers trying to dig this thing open. Inside of there, I have my Angelbird CFast cards. These have worked really great for me in this camera, no problems whatsoever, not only in this camera anyway. I've used these with the C200 as well, and they work great. And that's all you have on the right side of the body. Moving on to the rear of the body, this is where all of the magic happens. Starting from down here, you have your power input, and this is a 4-pin LEMO. So you can use the provided cable that comes with the camera to power this off of wall power, or a D-tap cable to plug right into there and power from external power if you want. Above that, you have your USB cable input. This is USB-C, and I think there is a little screw thread right on top of that if you want to use something different from this USB support. But some kind of support for the USB connection is, I think, pretty vital, because I've heard that if you're recording to an external SSD using this port, if you touch this connection and wiggle it a little bit, you can drop frames when you're recording, I think especially ProRes. So you want to have something that keeps this a really solid connection, like this little support right here. You don't have to use this for recording though. You can also use this to connect to your phone, and you can use that to control and monitor the camera right from your phone, which is really cool. You do have this wireless antenna port right here as well, and you can connect to your phone, do pretty much the same thing through that connection as well wirelessly, but there's a little bit of lag on there. So if you want to do that with your phone, this is the better connection to use if you have that available to you. You do also have this Ethernet port right here, which can, I think with an adapter, also connect to your phone. I haven't personally used that. I think you can use this for some other stuff as well, maybe live streaming or connecting to and controlling it from a computer, from the web browser. So that's a pretty cool port to have on here as well, although again, I haven't completely explored that option just yet. On the top, you have your HDMI output port, and you have a couple of little screw threads on the top here where you can attach things like this HDMI support bracket. I actually don't use this that much because I have to use this little tool to loosen it up to let it go. And I don't want to carry that around every time I want to loosen this up to remove the HDMI cable, because you do need to remove it to remove batteries most of the time. So we'll talk about that in just a second. But yeah, it's just a pain. But I do keep this on here anyway, just to stop myself from bumping the HDMI cable too much. But you do have some other screw threads on the top here. So maybe, there can be some other kind of accessory here that could do the same thing, maybe in a better way. After that, you have the in-out port, which I believe is a 10-pin LEMO connection. Again, I haven't really used this myself just yet either. Under that, you have the little remote port here. I believe it's 2.5 millimeters. And I think this is how you are going to control the camera with the port keys monitor. Again, I have that coming soon, the BM5, which will be able to control this camera. I believe it's right through this port here. I'll make some content on that when I can. Under that, you have the mini XLR connector. Sorry, once again, I don't have an adapter yet for this the mini XLR to standard XLR adapter, but you could plug in your XLR microphones with an adapter right there. Then you have the COM port, and again, this will be able to open up some options, I believe, more and more in the future. I think that Zcam is making an adapter for this to be able to use timecode through this port right here. Down the bottom, you have, again, a couple of little screw holes. This takes Sony MPF style batteries, and the camera itself has an impressive battery life. I get quite a long time, maybe 4 or 5 hours out of one of these mid-sized Sony MPF batteries. And when you release it, or when you put it in, it doesn't slide up completely clear of the pin, so you can't slide it up and pull it straight out. You're going to have to tilt it back a little bit at an angle and then pull it the rest of the way out. And the same goes for when you're putting it in. Let me see if I can kind of show you this here. You can't just put it in straight with clearing the pins. You have to put it in a little bit at an angle, slide it over the tip of those pins, and then you'll be able to push this all the way in and slide it down to lock. So if you're having some issues with the battery on this, that will be it. And that's the reason why you need to remove the HDMI cable sometimes to remove the battery, because when you lift it up and tilt it, it's going to need a little bit more clearance here. And if you have a fat HDMI cable in there, it's going to create some problems where you have to remove the cable before you can tilt this out of the battery port. Bottom of the camera is nothing super special. You can't see it right now, of course, but there's a couple of screw threads down there, and that's about it. On the top, you have some more of the kind of main controls. I put tape here so that way I can more easily see what these buttons are set to for one reason. The little just raised, text or icons on these buttons is a little bit difficult to see, especially in lower light situations. So I wanted something that's easier to see. And also because these do have, secondary functions. This is not just an up and down arrow. You can program them to access some of your settings here. So I wanted to remember what I have these set to. So kind of two birds with one stone here using this tape. I have a terrible memory. So this is my little reminder here. Also probably goes without saying, but obviously this is the record button, and that's pretty much all you get on the top of the camera. You do have this one screw hole right here where I have this cage attached to at the moment, and that's pretty much it for the physical design of the camera. I'll go ahead and power this on now so you can see some information on this screen. So just holding that button down in the front for a few seconds, it will power on, and it takes probably about 5 or 10 seconds to completely power on to the point where you can actually start recording. And there we go. Now it's ready to go. So that's about how long it takes to actually start using. And these buttons here, like I said, on the left, you have the menu button. We'll do that last because we'll dive into the menu a bit more. Next to that, you have it says function button. This I have programmed to your ISO. So when I push it, you can see the ISO, it turns red, and you can use these up and down arrows to adjust the ISO right there, and then click OK to set it. The same way, this up arrow I have programmed to shutter speed, or shutter angle in this case. So pressing it once will highlight the shutter angle, and then up and down will adjust that shutter angle Let me go back down to 180. Pressing OK will then select that and set it in there. Finally, I have this OK button set to autofocus as the function. This is just one push autofocus. So right now I have my camera in manual focus setting, but if this was in autofocus mode, I could push this and it will just one time set my autofocus for me, and then I can leave it after that. This does also have continuous autofocus and I believe human tracking, but I haven't really played around with that much. The autofocus, especially with the adapter maybe, is a little bit slow, so I honestly don't really use it, but I do have it programmed here just in case. Again, I'm still kind of figuring out what things I want to have programmed where, but you can use this button in that way. And if you want to know where it will autofocus, hold this function button down and press OK at the same time, and this screen will pop up. I don't think you'll be able to really see anything right now. It's nothing special in my frame, but you can see this little box here, and this is where it will autofocus. You can adjust the position of that box in the menu where you want to have it on screen. And again, we'll see that a little bit when we dive into the menus, but to get back out of this screen, just hold down function and press OK again, and you'll go back to the standard information type screen. On the screen, you can see your resolution and frame rate, your battery life with a few bars type icon over here. You can see your audio meters on the side here a little bit, your remaining recording time, your recording or standby status, as well as which mode you're in. I believe there is some hack to get this into actual photo mode instead of video mode as well, but whatever, that icon means it's recording video. You can see your other settings down here, like ISO, your color temperature, your shutter angle, which somehow got switched here to 360. Let me go back to 180 there. Your aperture, your exposure compensation. Here, this is depending on which mode you're in. Of course, I'm in full manual mode right now. Your autofocus mode, other things like, your metering and whatnot. There's a lot of good information on the screen, and it's actually really a nice looking display. It's very easy to see, very clear, and bright enough, I think, to see in pretty much all situations that I've used it in. Okay, so let's see what's actually in the menu here. So to access the menu, you press, of course, the menu button, and it brings up a screen that looks like this. You have some different squares here that will bring you into different sub-menus. You got your record and video menus, which kind of work together in a lot of ways. You have your audio menu, your exposure menu, white balance, focus, image, connect, and system. So let's go one by one and check what's in those sub-menus. To navigate, you're going to use these up and down arrows. As you press down, it will cycle through in this direction. And of course, if you go up, it will go in the other direction, and it does cycle around. So if you want to jump from the end to the start very quickly, you can do that. And then pressing OK will bring you into the sub menu. In the record sub menu, you have options for your resolution. You got 4K, Cinema 4K, 3696 by 2772, and 1920 by 1080, 1080p. You can go up and down and choose whatever one, or press menu to back out to the previous menu. You can select your video system, which is NTSC, PAL, or Cinema. You can go into your project frames per second. So this is the kind of base frames per second you're working with. And in this case, I have 23.98, 29.97, 59.94. After that, you have your file format, and you have .mov or .mp4. Options, you can choose your split duration. So if you want to break this up into smaller or larger clips when you're recording, perhaps if your battery dies or something, you want to at least have those clips which have finished so you don't lose everything. That can come in handy. You got options for 5, 10, 15, 20, or 30 minutes here in this menu. And then if you keep scrolling down, you have options for your time code here. I don't have anything plugged into here for an external time code, so of course it's set to internal. You can check your time code value to either manual input or the current time. You can reset it. Count up has a couple options here: free run or record run. Time code mode. You have DF or NDF, and HDMI display. You can display this over the HDMI or not. And that's it for the timecode submenu. Next up is your proxy files. And again, like I said, if you're recording ProRes and you want to preview the clips in the camera, you want to make sure that you have the proxy files turned on. This will give you smaller resolution files that when you bring it from your card into your computer, you will have to delete those if you don't want them, or you can use them if you want. The playback frame rate you can choose from default or VFR. This will affect how it plays back in camera. And also how the files are formatted, if they are slowed down already or not slowed down yet. when you're recording with VFR. So depending on your settings here, when you're recording with VFR and you go to play it back to check, if you had things in focus or your framing or whatever, it's going to take forever to check your clips. So you can mess around with that depending on the effect. If you want to see the slow motion effect on the monitor, to show your client, for example, you can change the setting there, but you do have some options in how that plays back. The next menu, the video menu, again, like I said, kind of works together with the previous menu. This is where you can choose your variable frame rate. You can turn it off or select a few options. This will depend on what your project frame rate is. Right now, I have options for 3060 or 120. You can choose your encoder. And again, this will depend on if you're using variable frame rate or not, and things like that. You can choose, in this case, between ProRes 422, ProRes LT, ProRes Proxy, or H.265. Depending on your other settings, some of these options are grayed out, but you do have options for your bit rate and your rotation, and of course your wide dynamic range. You can just turn that on and off, but it does cycle the power of the camera, so I'm not going to mess with that right now. Under that, you have your options for your time-lapse mode. I haven't really got a chance to play around with that much. Next up is your audio menu. You can choose your audio encoder. You can choose AAC or PCM. You can choose the input, either your microphone or the XLR. You can choose your input level here, and you can see it's not super detailed in the control here. You can go up in 3 decibel increments, and you can see your meters on screen a little bit here. I think they may be updating this a little bit in the next firmware update. I'm not sure exactly how it's going to change, but that may change a bit. You can also choose your output level and phantom power, and this is going to depend again on what things you have connected here, but that's your audio menu. In the exposure menu, you can choose your flicker reduction settings from 60 Hz or 50 Hz. You can choose the exposure value. This, maybe is if you're using a different mode. Right now, I can't choose it because I'm in manual mode. You can set your shutter angle here, which you can also do from the home screen like I showed you, your aperture, your ISO. You can choose your minimum ISO. And you can choose your maximum ISO and the dual native ISO. You can change from low to high or auto. You can choose your max shutter angle, your metering mode between center, average, and spot. You can choose your shutter operation from angle to speed. I have it set in shutter angle, so I don't really have to mess with that. Even if I change frame rates, it'll automatically do that for me, and that's it for your exposure menu. Your white balance menu only has a few settings. You can choose the mode from auto to incandescent, cloudy, a few different settings here. But if you have this in manual, you can go here and dial in the Kelvin and the tint, and it has 2 priority settings. You can choose for ambience priority, which I believe gives it a little bit of a warmer feel, or white priority, which I think is more of a kind of pure, accurate, I guess you could say, white balance setting when you're using that auto white balance. Your focus menu will allow you to adjust this from manual focus to autofocus. So like I said, I have it set in manual focus right now, but if I switch this to autofocus, I can use this button, which I have set to one push autofocus, or if you have continuous autofocus, things like that set, you can use those in that autofocus mode. Let me go ahead and select that for now just to show you these other options. Your focus area, you can choose flexible zone, which is the little square that I showed you on the screen earlier, or human truck. And the focus area size, this is if you're using that square on screen which I showed you, you can switch between small, medium, and large. So the size that you saw before is medium size. To change the focus area, it will bring you out to this screen, and you can move things around. You can see, I don't know if you can see that there's a little red square on here, and that's just moving from side to side. It'll kind of cycle through in a grid pattern to choose where you want it to be set. After that, you have your continuous autofocus settings, just on and off. You have your live continuous autofocus settings, which I have grayed out right now because I don't have this on. Let me set it on and go back. And then, yeah, you can switch that on and off. Again, I haven't really played with these autofocus settings much, so I'm not really going to say much about them. Turn that back off for now. You can adjust the sensitivity. You can set manual focus assist, which I believe this, I have it turned off right now, but I believe this was, when you have this in manual focus mode, changing that focus will zoom in on the image so that way you can see more accurately what you're doing with your focus, but that's annoying for me, so I turned it off, and that's your focus menu. In your image menu, you have some options for things like the LUT. You can choose between Rec 709, Z-Log 2, or flat. I've been using Z-Log 2 pretty much exclusively You can also adjust the sharpness from weak, medium to strong. I leave that at weak because I prefer to do that in post. You can adjust things like brightness, saturation, and contrast. I'm assuming this is if you're in Rec 709 mode, the luminance level as well. In the connect menu, you obviously have options for your connections. So your network, you can choose these options when you're using either Wi-Fi or the Ethernet. I have it off right now because I obviously don't have that attached, but you can go in and dial in all your settings right here for that. You can connect the USB as a host, mass storage, or network. So depending on how you're using that USB connection, you can switch its function right there. The HDMI, you can choose to display the info. For example, this menu will display over HDMI and different options there. Multi-camera, I don't have anything connected right now. Finally, the system menu is another useful one. You can clear your settings if you want to completely clear them. You can format your card here. You can adjust your assist tools, so you can display them. I believe that's over the HDMI. So for me, I have that set, but when you do display the assist features over HDMI, it slows it down a little bit, so it gives it a little bit of lag. So you can use them to, get your exposure set and so on, but then you're probably better off turning them off when you're actually going to be recording, just to avoid that lag issue. But you have peaking, you can adjust the color here. Your exposure, you can have 2 zebra settings for a low and a high exposure value. Your frame lines, you can choose from some different aspect ratios. You can go back and you can choose the color of those as well. You can choose to turn your center mark on and off and adjust the color. In the system menu, you also have your options for de-squeezing for anamorphic shooting. You can export your file or import a profile. You can continue down here to set the user buttons, and jumping to that, you have the function button, which is this one right here, your F1, F2, and F3, which are on the front, your OK button, your up button, and down button, which I have right here. And you can customize each of those. So let's just go in and, for example, you can set from none to auto exposure lock, auto focus lock, white balance lock, aperture, ISO, peaking, exposure tool, white balance, HDMI on-screen display, shutter, EV, autofocus, magnifier, focus area, and back to none. And I believe each of those are the same. So I have mine set to peaking and exposure tool, which there are a series of exposure tools. As you press it, it will cycle through. The OK button you can also set for a few things, more of the same. So you can customize this quite a bit. I have my record indicator set to on. Those are the lamps, I believe, that will show you when you're recording or not. You have settings for your restoring your lens position, your LCD brightness, auto power off, which I have off because that's annoying. You can change the language between Chinese and English. You can adjust the date and time, the time zone, camera status. You can see some information here. And the version. One more thing I want to show you here real quick is in that exposure, you have the tool, and right now it's set to disable, and you can see those zebra settings for when it's the zebra. But like I said, you can cycle through different exposure assist features. So clicking tool will show you all of these, and I have it set to the button. It will cycle through all of these as I press it each time. So you do have false color, waveform, zebra, and vector scopes, and it'll cycle through those as you press it. So for now, that's about it. Like I said, there is a lot more that I really want to explore about this camera, and I want to get to know it a lot better. I want to take a little bit more time with it before I make a proper review so that we can, really get to know its ins and outs, especially as it pertains to my personal workflow, so that way I can actually comment on it a little bit more accurately. But just from my experience so far, it's been a wonderful camera to use. I've used it a lot on both personal and professional shoots already, and it's just been really easy to get started with. I mean, grading the image and everything, it's been really, really easy to get a good image out of this right out of the box without a whole lot of experience compared to some other cameras that I've used in the past. If you liked this video or found it helpful, be sure to give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to see more in the future and hit that little bell icon to get notifications when new content, including that review, is uploaded. And as always, thank you for watching.